How Should We Evaluate Leaders? Episode 424.
The 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with Vicki Davis. Every weekday, you'll learn powerful, practical ways to be a more remarkable teacher today.
Today we're talking with Dr. Toby Travis, an educator from Tucson, Arizona, about how we evaluate leaders. Toby, how do we evaluate leaders? Because it sure seems like it would be very subjective.
Subjective shouldn't be. Just as we say about teachers, we need very clear, rubrics of expectation for how we're evaluating teachers on various performance standards. So really the same holds true for leaders. And it really comes down to clear expectations, clearly communicating those expectations, and then clearly monitoring those expectations.
But is it possible? Because administrators and leaders wear so many hats.
Is it challenging? Yes. Is it possible? Absolutely. Because it really comes down to some key and core competencies of what it takes to be a trusted leader, for a school. They can be defined, they are known, and they can be measured. Again, I would say just in the same way that we try to approach teacher and staff evaluations, that certainly can be extended and should be extended, as others argue it must be, such as, the work of Bob Marzano. He talks a lot about that we need to really drive school improvement through the monitoring of the performance of our school leaders.
So you say that it can be defined, known, and measured. Do you have some particular models for these particular competencies that you advocate?
Yeah, there's a number of them that are out there. One that was a research-based model that was developed for the American schools in South America. Actually, there was a grant that came through, I think it was OSAC, that helped fund that, but the work of Dr. James Strong. Originally, they had developed a teacher performance evaluation system, which is basically a portfolio evaluation system for teachers. And then with the success of that, and it was tremendously successful, I've used it ever since 2010, I think it was, in my schools, have developed a similar portfolio-based evaluation system for principals and administrators. There's also a number of tools out of the business world. Oh, and again, Marzano and his organization have developed some excellent tools for evaluating leaders and guiding that professional development of leaders. Also, though, I would say there are business tools that savvy school leaders and administrators really need to keep their eyes attuned to. And just because it's been developed, for a business or corporate model doesn't mean that it cannot be adapted and shouldn't be adapted to the school setting. And chief among those, I would say, is the work of the Trust Edge Leadership Institute out of Minneapolis, where they've been able to identify the 8 core competencies that leaders need to have, and it's directly applicable to school leaders.
Okay, so this is a tough one, and in my teacher hat, I've heard it. Many teachers think that they are qualified to evaluate what makes a good administrator. And of course, every teacher has their own lens. Where does the relationship between the administrator and the teachers come into the evaluation?
It's huge. It's perhaps even number one. In fact, in my work and research, what I've identified is the number one indicator of successful schools and successful and effective school administrators is trust. That is the number one indicator, and it doesn't matter how you measure success. In other words, if you look at the research and student achievement levels, what you'll find is the schools in which students demonstrate the highest level of achievement, you will find the most trusted leaders. You find it in athletics and in extracurricular performance measurements of students that are doing well in extracurricular or co-curricular activities, where schools see the greatest level of success in those areas. They also are the schools with the most trusted leaders. In the private school sector, where you see the bottom line, the financially healthy schools, the healthiest schools are led by the most trusted leaders. Another measurement has been done with parent and community engagement. One study shows that the greatest amount of discretionary time and energy being volunteered to schools by both employees and stakeholders is in schools that have the most trusted leaders. So again, the number one indicator of the most successful schools and most effective school leadership is trust. And that's all about relationships.
Incredible. So instead of saying, do you like so-and-so,
Right.
people should be asked, do you trust?
Do you trust him or her? Yes. Right. It is the question. And what a lot of people have the fallacy of thinking, Vicki, is that trust is some sort of soft skill. Either you have it or you don't. And it just isn't true. And there's so much research out there and tools to help support leaders become trusted. How to identify it, how to apply it, how to develop it, how to repair it, which is difficult. It takes time, but it can be done. There's a lot of work and research that's been done in that area. And now a lot of work and research done in the business world. Now, in the last few years, that has turned its focus on educational leaders. It's an exciting and a fascinating area of development, professional development for school leaders, because it has direct correlation to student success. And there was a piece that came out, and I'm blanking on the name. I should have had it right here for us to talk about. But again, it came out of Robert Marzano and his team. They did a meta-analysis of every piece of school leadership research that was done over a 30-year period. And as they did that meta-analysis, out of it came 21 what they called responsibilities of school leaders and school leadership teams. And so what it identifies for us is 21, if you will, competencies that school leaders must demonstrate in order to be trusted. It provides for us a path, if you will, a guide to how do we identify areas that are weak in our leadership and how to remedy that.
Wow. So you've given us a lot, and it's kind of blowing my mind. So how to become trusted and how to repair trust. So let's say an administrator, or let's say a teacher has an administrator they really like, but they know that administrator is not trusted. Where do they point them to the research that helps repair trust?
Probably the leading resources in the area are coming out of, again, the business world. So Jim Collins, Good to Great, probably the best leadership book written in the last 50 years.
Absolutely.
And
Excellent.
Good to Great for the social sector. Directly applicable to school leaders. David Horsager, The Trust Edge, it went #1 on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list a few years ago, has direct application or can be applied to school leaders. Again, the work of Marzano and his team, there are concentrated efforts in trying to help school leaders develop that skill set. One of the core things that we have learned and identified in the research, which is not unique to schools, but must be understood by school leaders, is it's all about a team. It's not about having one charismatic, effective school superintendent or principal. It's about a superintendent or principals or department leaders who can develop a team. Because as I referenced the 21 responsibilities that came out of the meta-analysis, no one individual can demonstrate competency in all of those. There's no way one individual can be gifted in knowledge of curriculum instruction and assessment and also be a powerful change agent. Those can be very different skill sets. So it's about identifying what are my skills, what are the things, and being honest and humble about what are my weaknesses, and then I staff and build a team around me to make up for that, if you will, because it is about core team that can lead the organization, lead the school on a path of success, but it requires humility on the part of that leader to be able to recognize that, no, I can't do all of this on my own. I have strengths and I have weaknesses, and I need to staff accordingly.
Toby, as we finish up, could you speak to the leader who maybe is disheartened and feels like 21 things, this is so much? I mean, you've already kind of spoken to it that you can't do it all, but could you give a word of encouragement and a word of direction and hope for those leaders, whether they're beginning or they're at a turning point in their career, or something has just not happened right, or some critic has come out of the woodwork that's just really making the leader wonder, can I do this?
Well, first of all, you have to kind of check your heart. Do you want to do it? Are you there for the values, the mission, and the vision of the school? Because if those aren't in place, then you may be in the wrong place. So it first starts with that core issue, that heart issue of, am I fully bought in to what this school is about? If that's true, then you need to be able to, again, authentically and humbly evaluate, well, what are my skills? What am I bringing to the table? What is lacking? I need to assess my level of trusted competencies to lead a school, and then seek the support to develop those areas that need to be developed. I would say also to that individual that you've got to be committed to the long haul. Successful schools are not built quickly. It doesn't happen overnight. The rare stories that we read or see in the news of, the turnaround schools, it doesn't happen in a semester or a year or 2 years. In fact, the literature tends to show it's more like 5 to 7 years it takes for sustainable, systemic turnaround for schools to get in a better place. So that takes a long-term commitment on the part of school leaders. And so I would say to that struggling leader is, okay, check your heart. Is this really what you're committed to? If you are, yeah, there's a path forward. There are ways to do this, but you need to be humble. You need to be authentic and honest about your own skill sets, both assets and weaknesses, and then be intentional about building a team and developing trust. First and foremost, it's all about trust. And if that's not there, then you won't succeed.
And you remind me of my headmaster, Dr. Brian Doherty, and he often tells me, Vicki, it's a marathon,
yes.
not a sprint.
Yeah.
And I think you and he have been reading from the same playbook, because I think that's a fantastic and very important reminder. And my words are out there are just that any of us who want to lead, in terms of my own leadership, Carrie Patterson's The Influencer was pivotal, because it talks about the characteristics of leaders. And one of those is that we're generous with our time. Mm-hmm. And that we understand that does take time to develop that trust. Trust is earned. Trust isn't just a sparkle in our eye that we have the moment we walk in the door. It takes time. And honestly, it takes problems and difficulties to earn trust very often.
Exactly.
It just does. So I totally agree with you, Toby. And we will include in the show notes all about Dr. Toby Travis. He has so many great things to share with us. And I also have to give an extra thank you, because Toby and I were going to record this some time ago, and we had some internet difficulties and had to reschedule. And sometimes folks won't reschedule because they'll think, and I even had a few today. So thank you, Toby, for coming on the show. And thank you for encouraging all of us to earn trust, because we all do need to earn trust. Hi, teachers. This is Vicki Davis, your host. Every weekend, I send my free newsletter to more than 10,000 educators. It's full of ideas and freebies and all kinds of links and resources that are only in the newsletter. To get your copy, sign up at coolcatteacher.com/newsletter.
Thank you for listening to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. You can download the show notes and see the archive at coolcatteacher.com/podcast. Never stop learning.